Hello.
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 And welcome.
And welcome
And welcome
And welcome to
Backseat Genius.
to Backseat G.
To Backseat Genius.
the Backseat Genius.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of The Backseat, a Lorcana podcast from the Backseat Genius competitive team. Today, we'll be meeting 2 more of our members of the team and talking about the upcoming Disney Lorcana Challenge coming up in Vegas. And then, like always want to say a huge shout out to our sponsor, Supernova Toys and Collectibles. Make sure to check them out at supernovatc.com. They're great. We love them. They love us. But more importantly, we love all you. So let's get right into it. Who do we got here today? We have me, obviously. You guys might notice Teddy's not here. He was a little busy, so I'm going to be leading things today. It's going to get a little crazy, but it's fine. We'll deal with it. Miles is back with us again. Hello, Miles. How you doing?
Pleasure to be here, Tomas. Happy Teddy isn't here. Not going to talk any trash about my limited game because, he really took advantage of me the last time that he was here.
Oh, yeah.
I 2-0'd him the last time for you, so...
Whoa, hey, Johnny, we haven't introduced you yet. You gotta chill.
You know what? It's well earned. It's well earned. I deserve that. No,
No, not Miles. Teddy.
Yeah,
I 2-0'd Teddy last time.
Perfect. We
honestly,
love to hear it.
Teddy's like a dirty Ruby Amethyst player. He hasn't played anything since set 2. Like uncreative, loves Flynn Rider. We'll talk about that later.
Just to get back at him, we'll make sure to put a lot of like cards and deck lists and stuff they just got to throw on screen. Next, we have Justine. How's it going? How you doing today?
What up, guys? I'm here. I'm finally here. Actually, I wanted to be really active in this podcast, honestly. Because I just have a lot of things to talk about. Honestly, how you guys doing? I am an Amber Steel player. Honestly, mostly Steel player. If anyone don't know me, a lot of people in Chicago area know me because we go to like 3 locals. But I am an Amber Steel player most of the time. I do a lot of deck theory. I enjoy deck theory more so than playing, if that makes sense. But also
a fellow deck list starer.
Yeah. Honestly, so I came from the OCG. If anyone doesn't know, that's like the Japan, because I didn't grow up here in the US, so I grew up in the OCG. And as
that's
a lot of you guys, first of all, it was Yu-Gi-Oh. So, but a lot of the times our thing wasn't a deck list. Like we didn't have any like decks to look at for like proven deck lists to look at, because we were the first wave, just kind of like what we're doing in Lorcana right now, where it's like we were the first one to touch the cards, and nobody's like actually like touched the cards before us, like 3-4 months before. So we don't really have like a big like data to like go off of. So I grew up in like a deck build type of mindset. That's why I'm mainly addicted to like creating decks, whether it's good or not, unfortunately. But
yeah, we love to see it. Well, I guess since we're already getting a little bit of your background, Johnny can wait even longer. Let's finish up your intro real quick.
Sure.
So we already talked about you a little bit. If there's anything else you want to tell us about you, feel free. But other than that, like, do you have any other TCG based background? Was it mostly Yu-Gi-Oh? What about TCGs in general do you enjoy, and what brought you to Lorcana specifically?
So so it's Yu-Gi-Oh first, and then I quit Yu-Gi-Oh and went to Pokemon for like 4 months, and went back to Yu-Gi-Oh, and then Digimon, and then One Piece, and then recently Lorcana, obviously. I grew up in just Yu-Gi-Oh, just watching the anime, so that just got me into like the whole school. At that time specifically, we were just playing Yu-Gi-Oh like at the cafeteria or whatever. So that just snowballed from there to like locals to like I think Lorcana is really like, it's just Disney. Honestly, what drives me with this game specifically is that it's Disney, and I'm a big fan of Stitch. I'm a big fan of just Aladdin, and just the art, and just the appreciation for like the enchanted cards and competition. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
I love to see it. That means we have a very good spectrum on the team, because I'll be honest, I'm the exact opposite. I came to the game. My friend told me like a week before release that the game was really good. He's like, "This game's awesome. You got to try it." And I was like, "Okay, it's Disney. Like, if the mechanics are good, like I can put up with it." And oh god, now I feel like I'm gonna have to start learning the soundtracks. It's creeping into my brain.
Some of them are really good.
Oh yeah, before we move on to Johnny here, just real quick, do you have any kind of big standout TCG accolades or finishes? Anything you want to, let people know how good you are?
Well, it's just I've topped a lot of like UDSs in Yu-Gi-Oh, obviously. Uh, in Lorcana, like a couple of stitches. Like I just have a playset of the set champ stitches.
Yeah,
Couple
no
of
big
the
deal.
it's just four of them. I'm a big fan of Stitch, like I said, so I had to get four. And two Ursulas or three Ursulas from the set champs, and yeah, that's where we're at. That's where we're at.
All right,
Justin, you
perfect.
stand atop of locals everywhere you go. Like I see you on Facebook posts all over Chicago. Like
Well, I play
if
sometimes like
Justin's playing anywhere, he's winning.
I it's also like I also make fun of myself because like I play non-meta stuff too, and I still manage the top. So I just want to like, I guess just be
Oh
humble. I
yeah,
guess.
yeah. Get the nice humble brag in there. All right,
Yep.
perfect segue. Johnny, you gotta one up that. So first of all, who are you? What do the people need to know about you? I know you as like a Lorcana playing robot, but I'm sure there's more going on over there.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was just a couple years ago. It was during COVID. My brother and I were like, man, what should we do? Like we're kind of bored here, no one's working. So we were trying to figure out kind of a game to play.
Mhm.
And my brother knew that when I was younger, I played Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, I never got that serious into Yu-Gi-Oh!, but he knew I played it. So he's like, let's do Yu-Gi-Oh! And then, I mean, for anyone who plays Yu-Gi-Oh!, I was like, I don't know if this is a good time to get into, to get to Yu-Gi-Oh! I showed him Spirit Reaper, if anybody knows that card,
Oh my
and
god.
one of the original cards. And I'm like, here, look at the text. You pretty much have to scroll. And I'm
Teddy, you
like,
better
yeah, I
get that
don't
on
know if we
screen.
should do that. So, so I was like,
Absolutely.
right. So I was like, I don't know if this is the best start. And so I was like, but I was always kind of interested in doing Magic, so I was like, maybe let's try to get into Magic. It's obviously like further along into the game, but I think it's a little easier to digest, and text isn't as long for the most part.
That's true,
um
actually. Yeah, that's true.
yeah, so it's like you could kind of like get into it and understand, and also with the whole special summoning, normal summoning effects, all the stuff with Yu-Gi-Oh, like I just feel like there's more to grasp, whatever, and to move on from that. So we kind of got into Magic a little bit. He got out of it a lot sooner than I did. I kind of stuck with it for a bit, but I was always a huge fan I'm a big fan of like the main event of competitive. Like I've never been like a mini game type of person. I always, whenever I play something, I want to play what the straight like competitive is. And so that was like standard at the time. Like if you want to be a pro, you got to play standard. But it was kind of dead. So it was really like modern, and so it's just like I would go to events to play standard, and then they'd be like, oh, we don't have enough people, do you want to play draft or whatever? So like I did that, I played Magic for like a year and a half, 2 years, and then I stopped up until Lorcana came out, and I saw an ad on YouTube. I sent it to my brother. I'm like, maybe this would be cool. We went to we were one of the first like 40 people that lined up at Gen Con when it came out to get some stuff.
Ooh, real nice.
Yeah, it was real nice, and unless anyone knows of the horror story, so
The horror
we were waiting
story.
outside.
I was
We
there.
waited for
I was there.
like 6 hours.
Yeah.
We were there at like
Excruciating.
4 a.m. and we got bumped all the way to the back of the line because of a whole
Ooh.
mess. So if you know that story, it's a whole thing. But
You were part of that? No shot.
I was part of that. Yeah. But we kind of got blessed because we were like, man, like all the starter decks sold out, sleeves, mats, and everything. We're like, so what's gonna happen? And the people were like, because what they were doing, they were cutting your badge when you got a booster box, but they were like, we're just not cutting anyone's badges anymore. So we were able to go around the line and get like, so the first few people only could get one booster box, then their like badge was cut, so they couldn't get any more, or we were able to go back in line and get more. So we're like, all right, it's a fair trade-off, I guess. But yeah, that's kind of my TCG. It's not a very long like history. I would say Lorcana is like the first actual serious TCG that I've been a part of, and then
Interesting.
I mean, other than that, I was a competitive Call of Duty player that I went to events for and things like that. So as far as my competitive side of like games and things, that's where I really come from, and
That
what I
makes
spent
sense.
Call
most
of
of my
Duty
years
thing really
doing.
tracks.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was my big thing. It was like
You
school,
say he has big Call
go
of
home
Duty vibe,
scrim.
Tomas?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
Dude,
not
I'm
not
saying.
saying that.
Thank you for that. I think that's a compliment. Maybe it's not. Definitely was. I'm not one of those lobby people. If that's what you're talking about, the the MW2 lobby people. That's not me. But yeah. So that's my history.
So I guess with that said, what about Lorcana has kept you around this long? What made it sink its roots?
I think because honestly, the base of the game is like Magic. It's pretty easy to understand. It's what do you call it? It's like
Easy
it's
to pick
easy
up,
to
hard to
understand,
master.
hard to master type of thing. Yeah. So there's still a lot of strategy to it, but it's something that a big part too is like my brother's still into it. A big thing for him why he got out of Magic was because he was like he felt like he was like way too like we got in way too late. So in this we got in right at the beginning. So I think that's part of it as well. But also, I mean, I'm a fan of Disney. I wouldn't say like I'm diehard Disney. I like the Disney movies, a lot of them. I like the soundtracks and things. So I'm kind of like in the middle of you two. Like
Yeah.
Justine loves it. You're like not really into it, and I'm like I'm down to go see. I'm a huge film fanatic too, so I've seen like all the Disney movies and stuff. But yeah.
Oh, there we go.
But yeah, I think the competition part of it when they came out with DLCs, and how big they were, I think that helps too. Like if they came out with like a 2,000 person max and like 300 people signed up, I may have been a little more inclined to be like, I don't know where this is going. I might like dip out, but it's been proven that obviously people are into this game, and it looks like it'll continue to grow.
Yeah, we're looking like, I mean, with the way things are selling out, who knows? Maybe next year they bump it up to like a 5,000 player cap, and we're still selling out in 10 minutes or something crazy. But
If that happened,
yeah, we'll see what happens.
that'd be wild.
Japan
Alright, speaking of all
launches in
that-
January. Like China launched like 2 weeks
Yeah.
ago. Yeah, we can get to that on another episode. But
Mhm.
yeah, the
Yeah,
growth
the game
not
just
a
keeps
problem.
blowing up.
Absolutely.
So, speaking of DLCs, perfect segue. Thank you, Johnny.
Mhm.
Guys, let's be honest. Is there anything on anybody's mind except for DLC Vegas coming up? Like that's what everybody's looking to. You know, most of us here are attending. Anybody that's not is still going to be looking at results, going to be looking at deck lists. I mean, real quick, show of hands. Who is going to Vegas? I know I'm still on the wait list. We'll see what happens with that.
But you're going,
You guys-
Tomas.
Yeah.
Like,
I'll
you're gonna
be
be
there.
there.
I'll be there. Someone better bring a
Absolutely.
big backpack because if I don't get a ticket, I'm sneaking in. They can kick me out, but like, it'll be fine.
I want to piggyback just really quick off of that. Like, and when we touched on that in first episode, guys, that like when we talk about like who's going and who's not going, right? Like that is not a litmus question for like who's committed to Lorcana and who's not. Like this is a literal crapshoot. Like I had to get the ticket for Vegas with a friend of mine and my fiance all on a computer at the same time trying to refresh for the same ticket. And the
That's
fact that we
crazy.
even had to work that hard, man, to go to a card game, like for a game that had been out for less than a year at the time, crazy. And so everybody who is not attending, but who wanted to go, you are vicariously with us.
Mm-hmm.
Like we love and we support you. And like, I would hope that we would try to frame it as frustrating as it may be, to try to frame it yourself as this is good for the game. This game is growing, and you're with us. You're in the backpack, like you're coming. So
yeah,
just a broad frame there.
I mean, I don't know if there's any better way to show it than the fact that like, I mean, the promo cards and especially the Mickey, like that stuff is all amazing. But I know for a lot of people that are going, the one prize they want is that qualification for Continentals. And I already have mine, and I'm still trying to hit up the rest of these DLCs just because it's such a great time.
Shameless
So-
plug, almost. Shameless.
I mean,
I was gonna say every
I mean,
episode he's a
you
part
know,
of, he's gonna throw it
Kind
in
of
there.
unnecessary,
I
honestly.
already have
like-
my Mickey as he slightly just like brings it on camera. Like I already,
Honestly, like I wasn't talking about it. Miles was.
I mean, you know, scoreboard.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, you gotta put it.
You're
You
gonna
gotta
be talking
remind
about
us. You
just
gotta
like
remind everyone.
dinner.
Thousands
What are we gonna
of
do for
people-
dinner at Vegas? Oh, I don't know. I don't. Maybe we should go to. I don't know. And he's just pulling up his Mickey. He's like, man, that's a good question.
Yeah,
How much
That's
should
right,
I bet?
I'll take some more pictures with it for you guys for the private BSG Snapchat.
Yeah, please don't.
Guys, we
Yeah.
literally have a section in our Discord that's specifically for Tomas's pictures of his Mickey.
Absolutely.
And we're at like 467
Disgusting.
pictures now, Tom.
Yeah,
Something
Yeah,
like that.
I gotta get
60 yeah,
500, one for
67,
each
yeah.
other Mickey.
it's gross. It's gross.
All right, so let's get into Vegas. All right, I mean DLC, big event. For anybody that's not familiar, these are currently the biggest events we have in Lorcana, outside of Continentals and Worlds coming up next year. This one, if I'm not mistaken, we're looking at a 2,000 player cap. We're gonna have a day one 2-game format Swiss into a cut to, I think this is still top 64 even with 2K. Ooh.
Should be.
Is it now?
Yeah, it should be.
Miles,
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
muted,
it
thank
is.
God.
Thank God he's muted.
Whoa, hey,
It's not getting
oh.
any better.
So,
Oh
I
no,
mean,
Teddy's
yeah.
gonna be watching the edit like, what did he just do?
You
happened?
can clip it.
What did I
That's
see?
my mistake.
He's like, I gotta
Yeah,
figure out
that'll
how
be-
to
that'll be good
blur
for
out.
YouTube Shorts. So yeah, I mean, like this is what we have to work towards. I mean, we have set champs obviously every set, but I think it's pretty safe to say all the work everybody that's putting in to be serious at this game is trying to channel this into the DLCs. So I mean, we're mostly going to talk about like our general thoughts heading into the event. We'll break down, there's some consensus on kind of like what the top of the format is. We'll talk through those decks, maybe talk about some other stuff that we're still expecting to see, but maybe a little less common. And then just kind of talking through that. So, I guess real quick, for those of you here that are going, have all of you been to a DLC already, or do we have anybody that this is going to be their first event?
Yeah, I've been to Atlanta, Texas, Chicago. Yes.
Yeah. Justin and I were both at Texas together, and me and Justin were both on the same deck.
Oh,
Just
no.
I know it's painful, dude, but like me and you, we were right there.
Same
We were right
deck.
there. We were playing Blue Steel, and we were both
Oh,
live.
that's right. You did go with
We were
that.
both live into round 9, which is crazy for Justin to play Blue Steel, because I know that like that was like a metagame call for him. He was like, I know this is the right deck to play on the day, and it was for both of us. It was. 2 of our teammates made it, and like we're very happy for them. Like our entire squad that day was live going into round 9.
That's
we got
true.
bubbled. Honestly,
That is
and that
true.
was so great. And honestly, I feel like that's like really what started BSG was like Abe, you, myself, DQ, Dewey, like everybody being alive going into round 9. It was like, oh wow, like are we like not trash at this? Like something going right?
I actually learned a lot from Texas. Honestly, like I took like honestly, it feels like so in these DLC since Atlanta and Chicago I got destroyed, but Atlanta
Can't
I
imagine, sorry.
yeah, Chicago I faced like 2 red blue twice back to back, and they 2-0'd me twice, and I just went home. Like literally, I just like, yep, see ya. But what I've learned from the Atlanta and the Texas one is that I think like gauging like what I'm playing, because we're gonna talk about like in a bit, we're just like what right deck to play, what are we expecting and stuff like that. In my head, after those 3 DLCs that I've seen, it feels like I'm leaning towards what I know the most, which is Amber Steel, right? And it feels like it's a right call only because I'm most educated about that deck, and I know the matchups between the existing
Mhm.
decks that we have right now. So I feel like not that it's the best or I think that it's the best, but I feel like it's more of like a comfort thing at this point, because we are in a format where you can play your comfortable deck, because the format in my opinion right now is very open, although there's like top 4
It's
top
pretty
3
open.
decks, but still like you can there's a chance, there's definitely a chance you're not like locked out, even though I think Sapphire Steel is like at the bottom of
Yeah,
of
luckily you don't have to play that again.
right. Thank God. But like, I think it's at its
It's
worst.
rough.
But you could still definitely make top 64. Like, what do I know? If you're really comfortable with Sapphire Steel, I'm pretty sure you'll make it there.
Yeah,
Versus
and I
like,
think what you're saying about Amber Steel, really good point. Like, obviously nobody has enough data to say for sure what the best deck is going to be, and I know you're not going to sit here and say yes, 100%. Amber Steel, everybody should play this is the best deck, but you know that it's probably the best deck for you. And it feels like such a cop out thing to say because anybody who's been around TCGs long enough has heard over and over and over play what you know. But honestly, like unless there's some kind of outside circumstances, like it usually comes down to that.
For sure.
And I mean, just like bringing it back to the DLC itself, for anybody who either this is the first big event you played or like, you know, maybe you played Atlanta and you've been trying to get tickets since and you're kind of getting back into things, like, yeah, there's going to be some nerves, some last minute like deck anxiety or whatever, but playing what you know is almost always going to go better. Because just those like random spots always come up. You know, you can test for like your good hand versus their good hand, your bad hand versus their bad hand. But you're always gonna like mulligan into something weird round 5.
Yeah, that's so
Someone's
true.
literally
Someone's gonna
so
hit you with
true.
like, you know,
Oh my god,
like
that's so
ruby
true.
steel locations, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh no, my testing
like-
didn't prepare me for this.
You're looking at your
Ruby
hand like,
steel
what do I
location.
do now?
I actually
Yeah.
ran into that in Chicago. Like, what the?
See, that's what I'm saying.
Hope
Like,
you don't
God,
see your unknown matchup in round 9. Okay, hopefully you see
Right,
it early.
right.
I'm terrified of that. I'm not gonna lie to you.
No, I mean, I think that's a fair talking point as far as like what is the best way to approach an event, right? It's, do you go with what's most comfortable? Do you go with based on the matchups you think you'll be playing? Which again, like Justine said, right now, it's pretty open, so it's kind of tough. I do have an idea of like decks I believe are going to be played mostly. I think that's something we might get into a little bit later as far as like when we're talking about meta stuff. But I do think there are times where like you just have a brain dead deck that's just top of the game, like last set green steel, and you can be like
how
DQ
dare you
and just
talk
transition
about that.
immediately the day before a tournament.
all right, perfect.
I
We're
like
getting the hot
that.
takes for the
Hey,
Are you
no,
saying
I mean,
DQ
yeah.
only top because he was playing a
brain
brain
dead
dead
deck?
deck? That's
That is a true story.
crazy.
Call DQ.
I'm
get him
sorry,
in here.
turn 1,
Get him in
turn
here.
2,
No
Bucky
way.
Diablo shift.
It's
Whoa.
okay,
Okay.
it's okay, it's okay. Bucky got nerfed. We don't have to think about it
I
anymore.
miss him. I miss Bucky.
To
Bring
be
him back.
fair,
Miles, you keep that up. I'm muting you.
To be fair, dude. To be fair, DQ played. So he was on
No, he's
green
good,
steel.
obviously.
He played 2 sapphire steels on like round 7-6, which is like kind of like relevant, right? And he 2-0'd both of them.
Yeah, he's lucky. He didn't face the
Hey,
blue
I'm
steel.
I'm
talking
not
about
saying
both
that
of
he's
those
not
That's
guys.
all
lucky.
I'm
I want to
saying.
talk to both of those
I mean,
guys.
he didn't
True,
face
true,
the blue
true.
steel.
The blue
All right,
steel.
all right, all right. Let's
Just kidding.
let's
DQ is
rein it back
obviously
in
good,
a little
but-
bit. All right, those events are in the past. We can pretend like they didn't happen unless it's
Oh, I
Chicago,
did
then
already.
Those results
What is
are always
Chicago?
relevant. Let's just go real quick before we start breaking things down more specifically. I want to get from each of you just a quick 30-second to a minute, like, where is your head at going into this? You can tell me a specific deck, general thoughts, what you're excited for, whatever you want. We're gonna go in order. Miles, real quick, give me 30 seconds to a minute. What are you thinking about?
Yeah. Tomas, it's a tragedy that Blue Steel is where it's at right now. I love that deck. I love the utility of it. I love Wheel, and I think that deck had a perfect amount of mid-range and top-end aggression for me. It's not a deck right now that I feel comfortable playing. Before I played Blue Steel, I played Green Purple. It was at that point an aggressive tempo style deck that played Curse Merfolk and was essentially trying to out tempo somebody, but was really an aggro deck with a tempo shell on top of that. The current green purple deck is different. It is a deck that has 4 incredibly different 1-drops, each for a different matchup. 3 incredibly different 2-drops, each for a different matchup. Bonsai for the red, blue, Ursula for Steel Song that we have to hard mulligan to, or Justin will just destroy me. We need who's the other one? We need Snake to cover Curse Merfolk for the red-blue matchup. And then from there, it is a toolbox style deck that is designed to have not a 60-40 against anything, but a 55-45 against the whole field if you pilot it correctly. It is a stressful deck to play because if you don't see the cards that you need, like you don't see the Elsa against the Diablo, or you don't see the Lyles against aggro, you can lose. But it is a tit-for-tat attrition deck that has game against everything, and I want to play control, but I can't. So I am
Alright,
playing green-purple this meta. I'm going with the Earlmeister Artifacts hybrid build. It's GP, baby.
All right, sounds good. Justine, how about you? I would like to reiterate, I did say 30 seconds to a minute, so let's try to keep it to that.
I'll keep
What
it.
do
Are
where
you
your
not
heads at?
entertained, Tomas? Are you not entertained?
I think so. Amber Steel, obviously, right? I'm going with Amber Steel because that's what I know. But there's 3 specific cards that help the deck. That like I feel like I can now beat Ruby Sapphire because of 3 cards specifically. If it's not for these 3 cards, I think I'd still be a little shaky. But because of these 3 cards, I am confident in going 1-1 against Ruby Sapphire more so now than before. It's because of Pete, Daisy, and Naveen all together.
Whoa,
Not
Naveen?
not 1 and 2 cards. Relax.
Oh,
We
Naveen?
have we have time for Naveen, but those 3 together. So there was a time where Ruby Sapphire just like ran over me if I don't play flutes, but now you can like choose not to play flutes because that is such an inconsistent card, and still be able to beat Ruby Sapphire 1-1. So I feel like now that we've covered our weakness as an Amber Seal player, which is Ruby Sapphire, I think we're good to go for Vegas.
Yeah, so it sounds like you figured out the 3 tricks that doctors hate to bring you success at the
That is
DSC.
strange because knowing Justine, Naveen was like the Antichrist at the beginning of the set. He
Oh,
was
no.
like, no Naveen. Naveen sucks.
Well, that's all
Now
right.
he's
a-
Candio's
now
probably
he's
not
one of
going to
the
watch
pillars?
this, so you don't have to worry.
He's a pillar? Okay.
All right, let's move on to Johnny. All right, these guys are being boring. They're telling me about cards. Johnny, I want to hear from you. What are the vibes feeling like going into Vegas? What do you got the read on the vibes?
I love that you chose me for this question, being the only one not going. I think the vibes are going to be immaculate because we have an immaculate team with immaculate vibes. Keep pizzas away from Dewey. That's what I've learned. That's what I've heard. He'll smash
yeah.
a box
Very true.
in 30 seconds or less.
100%.
He might be going up against Joey Chestnut in the next Netflix special.
Oh
But
my god.
I think, in all seriousness, I think if I had to guess as far as what I think the meta is going to be, we were talking, Miles and I were talking about this a little bit before we got on the podcast, but I believe Steel Song is going to be very prevalent. I think Ruby Amethyst is still going to be super prevalent because it's still that consistent deck. And I think the combination of being still a consistent deck with the fact that since it completely dominated an entire set from set, like, what was it, set 2, where it like was the only, if you wanted to win, you had to play it. I think that created comfortability with a lot of people, and they're too afraid to kind of branch off. So I think that will just always be a deck unless it just completely goes under the dirt if bounce doesn't matter anymore. So I think suspect Steel Song and that, and obviously Ruby Sapphire, I think will be pretty prevalent. As I think it's the most powerful deck right now. If you have the right pilot, the right build for it, which most of the builds are pretty similar, and I know Tomasz, you'll talk about that a lot. We'll get into that later. But yeah, so just as expectations, vibes going to be phenomenal. If you see anyone from BSG, it's just going to be a great time. Recommend
actually, on
asking
that,
for Miles's autograph if you
I don't
see
think
him.
we're gonna have jerseys, right? The jerseys aren't gonna be in by then.
Ooh.
So you guys are gonna have to actually recognize our faces.
We have to,
just
like, you
to-
got to take that up with
a
a
marker. He's got a marker.
Okay, I gotta share.
Take
I
a
don't know if you
screenshot,
guys saw.
folks. Screenshot us. I won't be there, remember that. But if you see me on the street somewhere, I mean, say hey.
Or if you
yeah,
see my
usually
blue
I'm roaming.
Crocs. Did you guys see
Oh,
the
there you go.
pictures I posted?
Blue
I got
Crocs.
some
Those
nice,
are actually kind of sick. Yeah.
Yeah,
some
I'll
nice
take,
bright
I'll,
blue
I'll take the
Crocs.
one. Yeah, I'll take the
the
one.
BSG
actually.
blue.
I like that.
BSG
actually.
blue.
I take.
I got 3 pairs that I ordered, so I can make sure I have the right size for Vegas. It's
Mm.
perfect.
I'll take the one. I'll take him.
All right, so before we start kind of getting into the decks specifically themselves, let's just wrap up real quick. I think community sentiment has more or less kind of all settled on it feeling like there's probably about 4 decks at the top. I think most people would agree Steel Song, Ruby Sapphire, Emerald Amethyst, Ruby Amethyst. Those are probably going to be the main 4 decks we're looking at. Emerald Amethyst maybe slightly behind the other 3, but still going to be prevalent. And then kind of around the fringes, we'll see stuff like Emerald Steel, Amber Emeralds, like the discard stuff, maybe some aggro, some Blurple, maybe we'll see
Blurple,
some
true.
Mufasa, maybe we'll see some Blue Steel. Those ones I'm not as sure about, but like, does that all sound about right? Would you guys agree?
I
That's kind
think
of
so.
where people's heads are at.
Yeah.
I think so. I think definitely like the top 4, the top 3 for sure is like cemented, I guess, in a way. Early this
Yeah.
early on in the set for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think it's important to like point out and note this, like, as like, I know that like when I think about going into a big tournament, and I know that this is a little bit of a psychological phenomenon that happens with people who get scared going into a big tournament, right? People want to play something that is simple, reproducible, and that they don't have to worry too much about. So like if you're like maybe not like a very serious tournament grinder, but you know that you're playing DLC Vegas, right? I think that the aggro deck, that this entire format, guys, was built around. Like, do you remember like that day, like where we all sat down and played
Like
around
hyper
Daisy
aggro?
Duck? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were like, okay, so like at the very foundation, right? Every deck in this format has to be able to beat this Daisy Duck deck, right? And that has been sort of like the groundwork foundation for everything else that exists. I think that we're going to see a lot of that. I think we're going to see a lot of people in the first 3 rounds of this event that are playing something maybe not Amethyst Amber, but like even Purple Steel aggro. So I think that will be the litmus test. Like, can you 3-0 the aggro? Like, can you grab 21 points in your first 3 rounds running through aggro decks if you had to?
I can.
Yes, Steel Song absolutely can. I am hoping on Green Purple that is where Ruby Sapphire falters, right? That like, so like, I'm very curious. Like, we know what our top 4 decks are, but everybody has an Achilles heel here. Like, I know that Green Purple, for example, has this very odd poor matchup into Blurple because of how wide they go and how good Elsa, dude, how good Shift Elsa is into like our shifted Ursulas and our Clarabelles. They can just exert and close games out.
Yeah, they're doing a similar thing, but going bigger.
Yeah. So a very interesting format, man.
I do like that point of the hyper aggro. Like, thinking about it now, if you can avoid Steel Song, which I do think is going to hold one of the largest portions of DLC. Okay, I played Chicago and as a steel as blue steel, and I saw 1 green steel, and my whole thing was like so if you can,
there was a lot of it in day 2
and a lot of red blue I was playing against. I wouldn't know. Tom, thanks for bringing it up again. You want to show off your Mickey?
Thanks for bringing it up. I was at home playing Call of Duty, bro. Honestly, I was actually at home.
I dipped out. Like, you guys don't even know my Fishbone story. Jonathan has heard it 15 times. He basically tells everyone for me. But but anyway, I do like that idea, or I like the point you made about the hyper aggro, because I do think if you can avoid Steel Song and you play a lot of the red blues, even the ruby amethysts, I think you have a pretty good shot with that hyper aggro deck. I was very successful with it at the beginning of the set because I was still playing the blue steel, and it's like I could let it get to like 12 lore, and then I would just wipe the board and I would take over from there. But I don't think there's really many decks right now that are doing that, because even like Steel Song, Justine, you can maybe attest to this more. I don't see a lot of people playing that many grab your swords, maybe like 2, if anything, at most, which Daisy can just like throw to the bottom, or bare necessities. So there's a couple ways to get rid of that 1 card that clears the board,
which is why
when you're playing. Yeah. So it's that is an interesting point that you brought up there, Miles. I could definitely see like a hyper aggro making its way to day 2 and like topping.
So I think one thing with hyper aggro specifically, one thing that's going to be really interesting to see is how many people actually bring it. I think it's definitely going to be a deck that, you know, not to throw shade at anybody, but like completely, you know, unbiased opinion, from what I've heard, it doesn't seem like a lot of the people that I would expect to make day 2 are considering it as a deck choice.
Of course not. No, but that's not.
I want to take that is.
But that's not the point that I brought up. Yeah.
Hear me out though.
Yeah.
So, day 1, this deck is gonna need a lot of 2-0s, right? And
a lot,
especially 2-game format in the blind. If they're going first, they can snag a lot of wins, but I think it's going to be a deck that's going to be really hard to not split.
It's a 1-1
Especially-
machine for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
think that, obviously like representation is going to matter a lot for conversion, but I think that's going to be probably its biggest hurdle, is if you have not necessarily worse players, but less experienced players playing the deck that also have to then get 2-0s against, in the later rounds, the people that are going to know how to at least pick up that split. I think it's going to be really hard for the deck to convert that way. But again, it's all a numbers game, and if 20% of the field shows up with it, then someone's probably going to top cut just based on the numbers. And someone gets a run where they dodge all the steel decks and they could make it day 2 easily. But
Very, very possible. 100%.
That's what I'm thinking. Like, there's gonna be that person that just happened to avoid it for most of the day.
Because
Yeah.
just really quick, in Texas, I played Sapphire Steel, but I played 7 green steels and 1 red purple.
Which would be nice actually though, to play green steels. That's great.
But the deck definitely can happen. I could dodge the other decks for sure.
yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, it's and that's like going back to what I said before. I think that's why you're always going to hear the advice of play what you know, because when everyone's going to be testing against the the top 4 decks or whatever, but when you run into the hyper aggro deck, or you run into someone playing Jafar Wheel or something like that, like, if you're comfortable with the deck, maybe you've already played against it before if you've been playing the deck a lot, or at least if you understand your plans well enough, it'll be easier to adjust on the fly because you aren't spending as much mental energy like figuring out how your deck works in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So
Which
do you
matters
guys have
for
any other like general thoughts you want to throw out there, or are we ready to start hopping into the deck specifically?
I have one quick question, super quick answer. No, we don't need like expanded on it. Everyone pick if there is a dark horse deck that you don't really expect to see to come out and place like top 8. I'm gonna say purple steel. I think that might be something that someone's cooking up, like their version of it, and that's a little different than what we've seen, and then they top it. Does anyone have like a dark horse they could see?
Johnny,
I could
can
see
you
the
qualify
good
that really
matchups.
quick? Can you qualify purple steel? Do you mean like purple steel like Benjas and Pete's, or you mean like hyper
Dude,
aggro beatdown purple steel?
Something, go back to Atlanta, dude had amber amethyst random, like, so I'm thinking like a purple steel that's kind of obviously going to be kind of the core, but they're going to have that like card or 2 cards where you're like, damn, like
Pinocchio
that works, something crazy, that just
crazy.
works. So
No,
I
I'm
think
with
if
it.
there's any dark horse, I would say like a purple steel iteration.
I want
I
to
think-
echo that. Yeah, sorry, go on, Justin. Go on, Justin. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, really quickly, the green steels are like not really mentioned a lot, but there is like a lot of like mid-range to aggro range of like green steel that there's a world where it can definitely be one of those, like, because there's a lot of like green cards actually that hasn't been like explored, like Ana, right?
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
so I feel like there's like someone who has like 4 Anas
Like a green,
like
like a
top.
green steel.
Something
Dark
that
Horse?
has like discard like Friar Tuck's Prince John Anna's, like something like that with
Sure.
the Prince John item, like something like that is what I'm like in the
Sure.
back of my head, like could sneak up on me.
I can see that.
I think for me, if I had to pick a deck that I think is gonna surprise most people, that it
Mhm.
makes, or like more copies than people are expecting for just top cut in general,
Mhm.
I think it's probably gonna be Amber Emerald. I don't know that it's a
Oh,
deck that
true.
can make it to
Okay.
top 8.
Amber
I feel like
Emerald.
there is some distinction between top cut and like specifically top 8 or higher, but
Mhm.
I think that would be the deck that might surprise people the most.
It's a good deck.
It's a good
And I
deck.
mean, there's gonna be at least something surprising at top cut.
Mhm.
I hate that deck
like-
actually.
I was gonna.
That's
It's
what I've
actually
heard a
got
lot.
really good
I was
against
gonna
Red Blue,
echo what
which was
Tomas
its
was saying
worst
with that.
matchup.
I was gonna echo that. But like, if everybody like took theoretically, right, which is like the best deck, like Ruby Sapphire seems to have like the inevitable top end that like we talk about in every format, right? Like it's and honestly, it kind of makes me sick to my stomach continuing to talk about this set over set over set. But like Ruby Sapphire continues to have the top end that wins games, like the Maleficents, the Sisus, the B Preps. Like, we are going to catch you. We are going to end the game. Yeah, nice flash, Justin, dude. You know what I'm talking about, dude? See, even even though we're trying to fight against it. But like, I think
Absolutely.
I think that the Emerald Amber has the ability to beat that deck. And like in a world where everybody played the deck that was like the best, maybe Amber Emerald would be the best deck to be playing. But
Mm.
shout out to our boy Abe. I think it's going to be an interesting event for him.
DQ also
play
believes that Amber
Yeah.
Emerald's the best deck this format.
I would maybe even go into the event playing that. Now I completely forgot about it, but yeah, if I was going,
Lucifer
I think
sick.
that's
Lucifer's great.
a really interesting thing to bring up too is just kind of like the format in general. Like Ruby Sapphire, definitely the top of the format, not necessarily best, but top meaning like that's kind of the biggest thing you can do in the format. And then the bottom of the format, or the fastest, is going to be the Daisy decks. And then kind of in the middle, we have a lot of Emerald stuff, some Steel Song.
we don't even need Teddy to
Dude,
put
you
it up.
just
It's
have
got
that.
all
Dude,
the
I just
cards.
have it.
Bro,
On your desk.
name a card.
Got
Name a
them
card.
ready, bro.
Real quick, name a card.
Can you mention
Imperial
Along Came Zeus real quick?
Proclamation. Yeah, so I think there's, especially like we know what kind of the ends of the format are, but that middle band, that's where we're going to see a lot of interesting stuff.
Absolutely.
And I think I'll call it now. I think a Mufasa deck is going to top cut. I don't think it's going to do much better than that.
Ooh. What's the other? What's the other? Wait, Blue Fasa or Amber?
No,
Green
the
Mufasa.
Mufasa that we respect.
Green
Okay,
Mufasa.
all right. Okay, got it.
Ooh,
Yeah,
we
like
should
Fasa?
definitely have a segment on this podcast that's like spice, and then we just go into maybe we're sponsored by Old Spice, and then we go into like
Ooh,
a
really spicy
a
card.
segment
Please
of
contact
something
us.
spicy
Please
that
contact.
happened at the
Oh my
event.
God.
Like, look at this deck that has
I
this
respect
card.
I respect
Might
it.
be a future segment. Shout
I
out.
can see it.
Come on,
All
Old
right,
Spice,
all right,
I use
all
you.
right. Let's get into the meat here. We've been circling the drain for a while.
Whoa.
Let's talk about some specific decks. All right, this is gonna go roughly in the order that we think things will appear, but not quite. I'm gonna be honest. This is just kind of the order we want to talk about things. So first of all, we're gonna be talking about the Steel Song deck. We have our boy Justine here to do most
Yes,
of the
sir.
talking, but
Yes,
you know,
sir.
as you've seen, we'll chime in for sure. Let me
My time to shine. My time to shine.
let me get this
Put me in,
pulled up
coach.
for reference. We got a deck list here for people to take a look
Trash.
at, but
Trash.
there's kind of a lot in this range. Justine, what do you want to tell us about this deck? What should people know going in, playing it, facing it?
Is that
What do we need to
Lantern?
know? Yeah, Johnny, where have you
So-
been, dude?
No,
So-
Can't
Just
see
to-
shit,
okay,
Tomas. Make
just
it
to-
bigger.
Just to address what Johnny's doing right now, which is Naveen, because I've actually have talked shit about Naveen. Okay,
and
but like,
most recently
but-
Lantern.
but first of all, Naveen, I like the card. So Naveen's actually really good. I think the card's really good. But you can. I have like a lot of. I was talking to a lot of people at the beginning of the set. I was telling them anyone who wanted to run Naveen, I told them that it only makes sense to run Naveen if you're running a deck like this, which is like shift centric, like more of like a slower side of the deck, where you have like like Cinder or Robin Hood. Because when I started to build Amber Steel, there was no shift at all. I didn't want to shift at all. I just want to put my card sideways. It was just aggro. I wanted to like double down on the idea of Daisy Duck and Pete, because I feel like Pete, Pete. I feel like Pete as a card sucks when you have to play a 5-drop pass, 6-drop pass, 7-drop pass, and then Pete just for them to live. I feel like Pete is more effective if you have Pete, Shmi, Piglet pass. Like that's more effective than like making a board and having Pete like put a nail in the coffin is like, okay, now you can't really out my board. But I feel like Pete shines in like a more like puke your hand out and then pass, right? That was the initial thought that I had when I was building Amber Steel. And then when the Candio came out with the more lantern Naveen, which was like the last thing I was gonna experiment with, because this is more of like a traditional one. Like this is what everyone plays, which is like the Robin Hood, right?
Would you say that he reminded people that you could put good cards in this deck?
Yeah, I mean, he reminded people that this strategy still can work. So my very concern about this build in general, because the Candios list wasn't running Daisy, and yeah, it wasn't running Daisy originally, which I can understand now that I've played it without Daisy as well. But the reason I put Daisy back in the list is because like I wanted just to double down with the idea that I've had started with. I didn't want to like influence myself fully from what the Candio was trying to go off of, which makes sense too. Like I think both are okay. And goes back to comfortability as well, because I played mostly like an aggressive version of this deck with like flutes, even with Pride Lands, like all together. Like the I forgot his name. He
The
played
like
the flute.
Zansayed build.
Yeah, something like that. So that's what I basically wanted to do, because I wanted
Mhm.
to beat red blue, because I know that red blue is definitely a weakness. But when I explored the Candios list, I found out that you can definitely beat Ruby Sapphire without Daisy, right? But it's hard if you don't open up Piglet, right? And I personally feel like if I'm counting on Piglet, then why am I not just doubling down on Daisy Duck as well? Wait, where's my mouse? Why am I not like doubling down on the aggression? If I'm counting on Piglet anyways to do aggression, why am I not just putting Daisy Duck as well? But with this list, so I've been playing this list for like a week now, and what I want to say with Amber Steel in general is there's probably like four different builds for this deck, which is like it's just straight up aggro, which I started with. There's also like a straight up just shift without even like the
Mhm.
Daisy or the Piglet, just a straight up shift, grab your sword centric. And then there's also a Steel Fossil deck that I've seen, but there's also a Pride Lands version that I've seen, right? I think what I'm trying to do in this list specifically, I run Tinkerbell only because of the mirror match, because I think Pete is such a strong card in the mirror match. They can play it on turn 3, 4, 5, or whatever turn. Pete will have an impact in any turns. So I think playing Tinkerbell makes sense because I play Lantern. I wouldn't probably play Tinkerbell without Lantern, but I do play Tinkerbell because of the Pete. Like I can't sing songs, so my best solution is to play a character that can clear the board
Mhm.
potentially. So
So
Justin, just answer this. Who
mhm.
is this Tink really for?
It is for the mirror match. This is
This is
yeah.
this is a mirror focused Tink. We're
It's
looking to
only
pick
for the
up.
mirror match, yeah. Or maybe Green Steel too, maybe because I've played a lot
It's
of Green
very good
Steel.
against aggro, green steel, and amber steel.
On
so
turn
let's
five, Johnny,
say
I'm not so sure, but maybe four. Okay, I follow. Yeah,
yeah, you
continue.
got the
Sorry.
lantern. It's
Yeah.
fine. So we're looking at your list specifically, but just like the deck in general, this shell for the people at home following along or the people coming to the event. What about the Steel Song deck, like just in general? What is the reason to bring the deck? What's the reason to play it? Like, what are you hoping to do with the deck?
I think uh, Amber Steel Song is the most toolboxy deck that it could be, because like not only could you use your cards to ping, and ping meaning like putting damage on the character, but not only can you put damage on a character on your opponent's side, but you can also do it on your side and then draw as much cards with
Mm-hmm.
Rapunzel as a card. So there's like I feel like this is the most like balance, I guess, in like a deck. Like it's not really strong on the lower end, it's not really strong on like the higher end as well. It's like the most mid-rangey deck. So I feel like the reason why you bring Amber Steel in any challenge actually is because it can definitely um withstand most of the strategy that a lot of decks do, because of cards like, now we have Pete, but Pete
Yeah,
also
so
like
it gives you game in a
solidifies.
lot of matchups.
Yeah,
Justin,
Pete actually like solidifies a lot of your matches now more so than before, because
Mm-hmm.
now you can just like have a wider board and not be worried as much. Obviously, Sisu exists, but if you have Sisu every turn, I mean, you're just him, right?
to speak to the power, brother, like, are we also though playing this deck so we can go Naveen Whole New World, which is like a absolutely insane game breaking thing that allows you to basically draw 5 cards and like
So
with tempo.
So the reason why, so yes, right, yes, but also like that strategy is also very fragile against the green decks, because there is a world where you have Naveen and they've taken your songs, because Ursula and even Bare Necessities if you're playing the Amber
In
Emerald,
that case, they
right?
probably wouldn't. You probably wouldn't have Whole New Worlded, but maybe yes.
Yeah, right. But now like I've been in situations where I have the singers and I have these strong characters like Rapunzel, right? Rapunzel gets stuck in my hand a lot of the times, because if they Ursula Deceiver on any turn, and I can't even like ping my own cards anymore to draw. So Rapunzel actually loses value on top of losing the song. So what I'm saying here is like Naveen's strong when you have a whole new world, but if they take a whole new world out, then Naveen's just a 3/3 for 4, which is like okay, right? But it's really not still not the best against like certain matchups. But
Yeah.
if I I just didn't want to like in the beginning, I didn't want to lean on to the idea that because like my initial rule with Naveen since the beginning is that if Naveen's not singing or playing a whole new world or Strength of the Raging Fire, he doesn't do anything. Which still now, I definitely I still think that's the case for sure.
Do we ship him back in hands that don't contain a whole new world? Do we ever keep him in situations where we have an aerial or?
Oh yeah,
creative
I
mulligan
never
decisions?
I never keep Naveen. Yeah, I don't.
Never, even if you have aerial.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, copy.
Only okay. So specifically, right? So it's not always the case, obviously, right? But
Sure.
in this case, it is because I run 20 uninkables in this deck, so you can't afford it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's so kind of to sum things up, I feel like I've always kind of described Steel Song as like the most Lorcana deck you can play because you get to do the singing, get to do the shifting, get to do some questing, some challenging. It sounds like you share similar thoughts. You know, it gives you game in a lot of matchups. Just for kind of quick hits, like what matchups would you say you're looking to run into the most with this deck? Like, what are you hoping to get paired against?
It's aggro,
Mhm.
for sure. Any type of aggression, like you could be purple, amethyst. You could be amethyst amber. You could be any type of aggression deck. I definitely confident in this list specifically as well. The other one is red purple, but only for the people that are not like super refined in red purple. But because like
So people that aren't, no, I'm not.
So
because
bad
like
players.
Not for
not
Kendall.
really, right? Not really, because like there's
Non-Kendall pilots.
because like red purple in hindsight, like if you picked up the deck and you played for it like a month, let's just say a month, which is like an okay time, I guess, depends on your learning curve. But I feel like when I play against like really good red purple player, I've never 2 them like in any list. Like it could be running like jank, like BKU, the rush queen, like the candle guy, what's his name, Lumiere or whatever. Like it doesn't matter what list it is. If the red purple player knows how to slow down the amber steel player, it's only 1-1. Like I'm only favored
Mhm.
if I go first, and like same thing for them. But those are so aggro, ruby amethyst, and definitely less. Actually, no ruby sapphire, please.
So would you say, so then on the other side, for people either looking to have an edge against this deck or people picking up the deck that, things they need to keep an eye out for, would you say Ruby Sapphire is like the biggest weakness, or what about this deck worries you? What keeps you up at night?
Right. It's definitely ruby sapphire and amber emerald. So
Hmm.
I actually want to say that Amber Emerald is actually probably the scariest out of all of them because there's a certain card that you can't stop. So Sisu, you can stop Sisu by playing like Peach, me, and like Naveen or whatever, right? Someone
They're
that's
just
like
like
over
getting around it.
right over two what do you call it in Lorcana? Attack
Strength.
strength. So over two strength, you can just play around Sisu by playing those cards, right? But with Amber Emerald, you can't even do that if they have Kita under the
Kita
sea,
Under the Sea kind of forced the issue there.
and there's you really can't stop it. There's
Hmm.
not a card where you can stop it, and if you a whole new world, which a lot of times you will. I think the strategy against that deck though is like just to go fast and pray that you draw your removals so that their aerial doesn't stick on the board. That's basically it. That's my plan against them. But a lot of times you're just praying that they don't have the Kita on 5 because a lot of times you can't end the game fast enough where like oh it's before turn 5 so I can end you before you can even play Kita. Like it never goes that way. It's always like turn 5 turn 6 where that matchup goes. But also Ruby Sapphire because Ruby Sapphire again it's the same card Sisu. Maybe less be prepared, but more of like the human Sisu and the dragon Sisu are the 2 cards that keeps me awake at night. Honestly,
Hmm.
Ice Block. Actually, no. Actually, I take that back. I take everything back. Actually, it's Ice Block. It's actually Ice Block. It's actually
Yeah,
not those 2 cards.
gets around Pete.
You
I
got some
swear to
nightmares,
God, the
Justin. A
minute
lot of
the
things.
minute Ice Block got printed, I was like, blue, and it's an item. No shot, right? So I was just so pissed because like I barely touched Amber Seal
Yeah.
last season because that's where the cards came out, right? Last season or last set.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as soon as I saw Ice Block, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. But yeah, it's definitely Ice Block, and then obviously Sisu on top of that. But yeah,
I
it's
think
good
I think
cards.
we can say the Steel Song is looking very strong. Tomas, I'd love to turn this on its head as we move away from what I think Justin would agree and Johnny would agree to, a very strong deck, a very strong contending deck for
The
this
best.
format. I think
The
according
best.
to the data, Johnny, what do you think about that?
According to the data.
Speak
No,
on that.
I know that Tom, you have your deck list, and I have a take on my deck list from playing Ruby Sapphire for a while. I mean, I did play Ruby Sapphire at the beginning of, I think it was set 3 when Lucky Dime
How
came
dare
out.
you, traitor?
I know. I know. I had to leave Blue Steel. What am I supposed to do?
Oh yeah, I see the list you sent me. I don't like this, but I respect it.
Yeah, I know. And the thing is, it's different, and I didn't like it either until I played it every time because of Santi. So, or at least an iteration like it. So I think there's a good duality there between the your version and like the version that I'm leaning towards now. But anyway, I just think it's just the best deck. I think if you took the best players, like all the best players, and for each individual like meta deck, and you pit them against each other in a fair format, round robin, whatever you want to call it, I think Ruby Sapphire is
I
the
agree.
best deck.
I agree.
So that's kind of what I'm saying. So take that with a grain of salt for anyone who's like, what deck should I play? I want to just play the best thing. I'm not saying that Ruby Sapphire is the best for you to specifically play.
That's a very
I
good
definitely
point.
think you need some testing of it. Because it is one of those where I don't think it's the most hard, but there are intricacies with the deck, specifically when you're playing decks like Ruby Amethyst and the unfavorable matchups. There's just very particular points of play, like angles you have to take against your poor matchups. But for people that know how to play them and maneuver them, it still almost feels like they have the advantage during the match. So that's my take on that.
I'd love to hear Tomas overall, I think, crack into the deck he has been maining.
Yeah,
John,
let's.
Johnny, you've been on this recently as well. Like, I'm just going to grab the mic a little bit and allow Tomas to have the floor as we talk about the other huge elephant in the room.
Yeah, so this is
talk about
Ruby
this.
Sapphire. This is gonna be so I think we can all agree Amber Steel, if not the most played deck, probably the second most played deck. Like it's gonna be one of those two. And then right behind it is probably either gonna be, Ruby Sapphire or Ruby Amethyst, but this deck is up there too. I mean the list that I have pulled up, this is Sailors, what I would consider probably the stock list right now. Johnny, I know you sent me something spicy, but I think we'll stay with this, not to confuse anyone.
Oh no, we
yeah.
can go over this, but I definitely want to give my take on that because I don't think the take that I have is something that's that foreign. I think some people have gone that direction.
Yeah,
but I
we
think
can-
this
we
is
can
the
touch on
main.
that,
This
too.
is definitely
Let's
the
go
main.
macro Tomas really quick.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
let's discuss like I see Brawl, 4 dragons, 2 B preps. What is that? 3. Wait, where are the Sisus?
There's 3 little, 4's big.
Four big Sisu.
Yeah.
Oh baby.
So
talk to me.
This, I mean, for anybody that played last set or even the set before, like this isn't any surprises here. We still have our core of, the popsicle, other items, an ice block, but our core of popsicle, Hiram, fishbone, quill. We got the top end with the be prepareds, the Tamatoas, the Sisus. We have all the good cards here, and we're playing them as soon as we can. I mean, big pickups for this deck for this set. We got Tipo. He's probably not the flashiest addition, but like foundationally, probably the biggest get for this deck. You
Mhm.
get to play, extra copies of your 2-drop ramp, so you don't have to mulligan as hard. He's inkable, which is something I'm always going to harp on. Really helps. We have the Cuscos and or hideaways that are very important effects this set, having ways to deal with items and not just having to rely on Maui to take out locations. And we got a sleeper here, Vision of the Future.
Talk to me about Visions, dude.
Yeah,
Talk to
so
me about
people
it.
were I think on the fence on this card when it got released. I'm gonna be honest, I don't really look at the set lists, so I didn't really see this card until people started talking about it. It looks pretty innocuous, and I can't talk. it's 2 cost, looks at 5, you take 1. So on its surface, it's more or less to develop your brain stapled together. Um, but the one thing the card really lets you do is just increase your filtering in the mid to late game.
Yeah.
Previously we had Grammatalas and How Far It Goes, and to an extent the develops, but now having vision, especially once you've gone through your deck, like this deck gets to 30 cards left pretty regularly. Like looking
You're
at
digging
5 is
after
long.
you're digging, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It lets you kind of just chain things together. We have,
Just
the
gotta
ice
say
blocks
that.
and small Sisus coming back in, just kind of as a necessary evil with all the small critters running around again. Medusa, Sisu, Be Prepared, Maleficent, like these are all still really strong removal options. And, you know, I would say at its core, this is so for reference, this is 61 cards. It hurts my eyes. I would say
Never that.
most people that are on this deck would probably agree that like 54 to 56 cards here are pretty much locked. There's like
Mhm.
the last couple slots that people are still debating, but overall this is probably going to be the shell of the deck that we see the most, and I'm going to be honest, probably is going to do the best. There's
Mhm.
there's some other options, like we picked up the blue Mufasa this set. We picked up some other things. I think those cards are fun, and I think they have a purpose, but
You need the Inkables, though. Yeah, we don't have
you
time
need
for
the
that.
Inkables.
Yeah.
I think Mufasa. It's weird to say, but I think that Mufasa, like to get on that card specifically, is a very good day 1 card, and I think it's a terrible day 2 card. And
Hang
everybody's
on,
gonna have
Tomas,
different.
break that thought down for me. What did you just say, and what
Yeah.
do you mean by that?
So basically, to kind of finish up my thought there, I think everybody's gonna have different goals going into an event this large. But if your goal is to, make it to day 2 and then continue on past that, I think keeping at least in the back of your mind what you expect like the quote unquote winners metagame to be is how a lot of people will put it. I think that's really important. Mufasa, I think especially in 2 game format, closed deck list, like you can definitely catch people off guard. It's a very powerful proactive card. If you know if a turn comes back to you and that's still in play, it does a lot. But if that card gets answered, you are setting
Right.
yourself so far behind. It's
This
not
is a
inkable.
surprise, like whole new
Yeah.
game. Yes.
Especially if people are going to be rolling up with 3 ice blocks. If you get to 8, you play your Mufasa, pick 2 up, and then they just go, okay, I'm going to ice block that and Medusa it,
That sounds
and
like
then
bad in the
also
mirror.
one jump.
Yes, in the mirror,
Yeah,
terrible
like
card. Yeah.
that's going to be tough if you get a couple of them stuck in your hand against the more aggressive decks. Like that's going to feel really bad. But if people aren't expecting it, like you can catch them off guard. I think it's very much a very swingy card, and especially in day 2, there's open deck lists. Your opponent gets to see what you're playing, and the people that make it to day 2 are going to be the stronger players. So not only will they have that information, but they'll be better at capitalizing on it. And this is something probably for another time. Like we can get into the super fine details somewhere else, but I think that's the type of card that very good players are going to see in your deck, and it's going to allow them to play slightly different game plans against you, but enough that it's going to shift the matchup, even if it's only a few percent. Like
Yeah.
that's gonna come up.
Let me ask you this, Tomas. I want to probe Justine and Johnny as we talk about this, right? I don't think that Justin or Johnny would disagree that this is probably the most powerful assembly of cards currently available in Lorcana. Now, comma, after that, how often do we 2-0 hyper aggro?
That's a really good question. Um, I think it depends, honestly. Like if they have a good start game 1, especially day 1 where you don't know the matchup,
Sisu
like
helps tremendously.
yeah, Sisu
Yeah.
helps, but if you don't know to mulligan for it and they have a fast start, like they're gonna get you. I think it's a lot easier or a lot more likely to split in 1-1 than
Yes.
people think, but I think it's gonna be hard to 2-0. Again, if you're going first and they don't have like a blazing fast start and you can steal the first game, you do have hands on the draw where maybe they stumble a little bit and you can catch back up, but it's definitely going to be one of the scariest things. I I'm not even joking when I say my plan for the matchup is just to dodge it and
Yeah.
plan to not get paired into it, honestly.
It does seem to me that like as something like, and I'll get into like what I'm looking to play in the tournament here in just a little bit, but just like the aggregate power of this deck and what it does between wiping the board, like digging for answers for everything, killing everything, shifting into answers, destroying your locations. It seems that the only thing that might make it stumble would be enough aggro decks in the first 5 rounds to prevent it from en masse moving to day 2. It does seem to be an incredibly powerful deck.
It's literally speed run into destruction into questing for 4, 5, 6, 7 on a given
12.
turn. Like literally. So yeah, it's ridiculous.
Justin,
yeah,
you seem like you have a
definitely
different thought. What's going on?
I think like when you said when Tomas says something about like dodging it, I feel like you have definitely a higher chance of dodging hyper aggro than it is for my chance as an Amber Seal player dodging this deck for sure. Which makes it like this deck being like the top pick, I want to say, if you're thinking about what what the top like pick is for Vegas. I would definitely strongly suggest this.
I think it's going to be the top pick once you make it out of round 3 or 4.
Yes.
Absolutely, I agree.
Like once you get
if
past
you
that
do.
sweat.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Because the chances of you playing a hyper aggro by like round 5, 6, 7 is pretty low for sure.
So it's gonna be hyper aggro is probably gonna be what you're most worried about facing in the early rounds.
Yeah.
In the later rounds, I mean, any deck is always gonna be worried about facing the mirror just because it's gonna be
True.
like the most swingy matchup for most decks. Outside of that, I think once you get into the later rounds, the really good Ruby Amethyst players, especially, and as well as the really strong Steel Song players, are going to give you trouble. Ruby Amethyst on the draw, it is very, very hard for you to beat their strongest openers. So that's another deck that you are very likely to 1-1 if your opponent is a strong player. If they are not super prepared for the matchup or they're less prepared than they think, you can definitely still 2-0 them. But later in the rounds, like you get matched up against Ruby Amethyst and you're hoping to walk away with the split. And then the Steel Song decks, it's still overall probably favorable, but they've gotten more tools. It's not as slam dunk as it was even last set. And once you start facing the people that like really know what they're doing, it starts to get harder.
For the Ruby Amethyst matchup as a Ruby Sapphire player, what are the cards that you're like when you look at it, you're like, I'm in a bad spot? What is
Flynn.
the game state actually? Flynn Rider still?
It's like specifically Flynn.
We have Brawl. We have a
Is it
couple
a combination
here.
of Flynn
So
plus something, or is it
it's-
just Flynn?
Yeah.
So Flynn is the main thing, but I mean the nightmare is like Chernobog's followers on 1, Flynn on 2, Sisu on 3, and then Castle
Classic
on
Nightmare.
4.
Yeah.
But Flynn into Sisu is hard for the deck to beat. On the play, you do have the ability to ramp on turn 2, play a Grammatala on turn 3 to contest the Flynn, and then Brawl or whatever else from there. On the draw, it's a lot harder, especially because you have the extra card on the draw. It's hard to get your hand
True.
small enough for the Sisu. So even if you play the Tala, like they might still be able to take it out. But you're in that matchup, you're basically always looking for ramp onto, play a Tala, play a Maui ideally, and just kind of like claw back the game from there. But if they come out swinging and they have Flynn Sisu and you don't deal with it right away, they go up to like 12 by turn 5 or 6. That's when you're in a really rough spot.
Is Ruby Chromicon not a viable like one of just for that matchup? Your Maui becoming a 7 swinger.
I think it
There
helps.
are people playing it.
It is
We're
less
seeing
necessary
less
now that we have the
against
Cusco.
Mm.
Cusco makes it so that you don't have to sweat the castle as hard. Like you still have to play aware of it.
That a lot
But-
though, don't you?
What's that?
You ink that a lot though, don't you? The Cusco?
See, but we were playing Emerald Amethyst, which I
Well,
think
see, even on the other side, you could say Ruby Chromicon is a lot of the times it's going to be used for Hiram. So you could say you ink
So,
Cusco, but
I
you're
think,
not going to have your Chromicon much.
I think you guys have unintentionally brought up a very good point with this deck right now. Like I mentioned, this is 61 cards. I don't know how to get this to 60.
It's
And
hard, bro. It's so
if
hard.
we want to play cards like Ruby Chromicon and stuff, that honestly, like for people that are bringing this deck, I don't even think the big question is like, should I bring the deck or not? It's what do I cut? How do I get this to 60? What 60 am I bringing? Like that is the hardest part right now. I I am the
Are you
biggest
thinking what I'm
hater.
thinking, Justine?
Yeah.
I do not
Of
want to
what to
play above
cut?
60, and I'm thinking about just playing 64 so I don't have to figure it out.
I think there is a card. So I have played this deck. I'm no expert in this deck, obviously.
I
But
think
What
we
are you
should
cutting?
add that
What
in
are
the
you cutting?
comments. for
What are you
think.
cutting?
right, what would you cut in this deck specifically, right? But
Yeah.
what I would cut. So I definitely know a thing or two about this deck because I've for the past three sets now I've tried to counter the deck. So
Mhm.
I kind of like an in and out like um information about the deck, but I feel like as much as Fishbone Quill is a good card
Yeah.
against Steel Song, I really feel like Fishbone Quill is
Dude.
the least necessary. Because like, okay, so
You're cutting
my
an
thought
Uncle
my
right
thought with
now?
Fishbone,
Bro,
yeah, my
you
thought
could
with
pull up-
Fishbone Quill
Can
is
you
that
pull
it's
up the
really
deck list I
good.
put real quick?
I think it's really good against Steel
We're
Song,
gonna be here
right?
for
It's
2
really
hours.
good, but do you really need a really good card when you're super favored anyways? Like I feel like obviously against a whole new world specifically, like
What if we
Fishbone
don't
Quill
hit ramp?
helps.
What if we
All
don't
right,
ramp?
let me
dude.
I'm not
chime
saying
back in here real quick.
don't run Fishbone. I
You-
said like just cut one Fishbone for it. That's where I'm at. Go ahead.
As the guy that played 3 Fishbone, 2 Greatstone Dragon in Chicago, because I thought
Sus.
Fishbone Quill was like at the worst it's been, I think it's a necessary evil right now.
It's not
It's
even evil.
How
I don't
necessary
know,
for it
dude.
to be like
Listen,
minus
so
one,
I've
or
been-
three?
I think against
Well,
any of the
okay, Tom.
aggressive starts, it is one of the only ways for you to like power out a fast Medusa. Like
Sure.
you can power out a turn earlier Medusa, but it's the only way for you to get it out like 2 turns early. It's also, it comes up where it helps smooth out like if you draw too many uninkables and whatnot. I think right now there's too many decks where you don't need it every game, but enough of the games you need it. And you know what card we've kind of been not really talking about because we haven't gotten to the Emerald decks yet? Clarabelle. You know what's a really good card against Clarabelle? Not having cards in hand.
True, but like, do you need four?
My
though?
I- dude, I don't-
That's
my
all
take
that.
would be
Yeah.
cutting. My take would be cutting a Medusa.
So-
I'd take it down from 3 to 2.
2.
Yeah, that's 'cause
I don't
you're
know,
playing
because
the
then that
Emerald
makes it
deck.
worse
I don't wanna hear
against. Yeah.
Personally, I would
Damn.
cut all the Sisus.
Pop back.
So it's also like I think it also, especially with Vision in the deck now, you end up in more spots where you play a ramp piece on 2, and then turn 3 you can play Fishbone and then play a 2-drop.
Yeah, see,
I think it comes up.
dude, from play. So I've been
Out of
playing
10
with
games, how many
Fishbone.
times? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And I almost. The only reason I'm not playing it now, and specifically too, because when I play,
Not playing
because a
crazy.
couple of people in our group they play no Fishbone, and I was always against it, and Justine can attest to that because he even brought up, he's like, "Do you really need Fishbone?" And I'm like, "Yes, you need like you absolutely do." But since playing like Tipo when that came in, Tipo and One Jump, I don't know personally. I almost never miss them. Like I almost always have one or the other. And I get what you're saying about getting Medusa out, but I'm fine getting Maui out, like too, because I'm not. My plan at that point against like something that's playing faster, or aggroing, is not about questing anyway. So like I don't need Medusa for the questing. So like Maui is fine for me. And I
think they
just
do enough
am
different
never
things.
ever playing Fishbone. I just never played it when I'm playing them, and they always have enough ink anyway already. Like they end up having more ink than I do because of the fact that I just don't even play Fishbone when I'm playing the mirror match, and then in the aggro matches, I already have like kind of what I need to control up to the point to when I like take over the game.
Especially if you
Um,
turn 3 Sisu, right? Like the one drop Sisu. I mean, the human Sisu, like which you will never like play Fishbone Kill over.
To wrap us
Sisu.
around like the power blue red as we sort of like orbit this. Tomas, let's say that we dodge writ large the aggro matchup on day 1. Are we
Mhm.
worried about anything the rest of day 1 or day 2?
I think that's honestly kind of similar to what we were talking about with Steel Song. I think on the whole, you're gonna feel like you're in a good spot,
Mhm.
but like I mentioned earlier, there are no free wins this set.
Yeah.
Like, even in your
Agreed.
favorable matchups, like, you still need to sequence properly, and it's, especially with this deck, it's very easy to make a mistake on your inking, like, turns 2 and 3, and just shoot yourself in the foot. So I think you're gonna feel in a good spot, but I don't think there's anything that you can take for granted.
Inking definitely separates you
Good.
from being I guess not a bad player, but an experienced player versus like a non-experienced player.
Yeah,
In
I
this
think
deck specifically,
personally,
more so.
like, later into the tournament, honestly, I'm gonna be trying to hit the Steel Song players that haven't figured out the matchup, and I'm gonna be trying to hit the mirror.
Absolutely. Agreed.
I think it's a very strong choice. Do not knock you for it at all.
Are you scared of Emerald Amethyst at all? This set.
Ish.
What card
I
in that deck would you be like, oh my god, like it's this card?
I think I don't know that
Bonsai.
it's like specific cards. Yeah, like if they open like double bonsai, like that kind of stuff, that's always
tough.
scary.
Hold up.
I'm-
Hold up.
It's still a purple deck, so
Double
like
Queen's
they,
Castle.
yeah, sometimes they just like castle you a bunch and you don't have it. I think it that matchup specifically, all of the Ruby Sapphire players are going to tell you they're favored, and then most of the Emerald Amethyst players are going to tell you they're favored.
True.
So I think it's like I think both decks are somewhere in the 60 to 40 range, and it's going to come down to like the specific pilots and the specific games to figure
Should we
out
get there?
who's on top. Yeah, that's a perfect segue. Miles, do you want to talk about your baby?
Oh god, not
It's a
the sigh.
problematic child.
Not
my
the
child.
problem.
This was the first deck that you played. This blue green, right? When we
Alright,
played,
so-
this is what you were playing.
Sorry, Johnny.
Because-
Finish that.
No, I was saying when you first came into the game, this is what you were playing. Like obviously a different version because it was a couple sets ago, but this is green purple, right?
Yeah. Just
Day
like
one.
kind of to touch on like kind of where I was when I started playing this game at the very end of set 3, like the set championships were just kind of wrapping up. That was at a time when this deck was sort of 4 Curse Merfolk, 4 Flynn Rider, like we're gonna kill you. Like this was a tempo deck, but it was really like an aggro deck that kind of shored up its downside with the bounce package. And that was a great deck. I think it was. I mean, like it was almost a buy versus the deck we were just talking about, like Ruby Sapphire. This was before they had Sisu and Ice Block in a way to really meaningfully interact with like an early board state. And some of my favorite games ever were just kind of running people over with Curse Merfolks and Flynn Riders. Like, oh, this is a great aggro deck, and then I have snakes and I have foxes and I have ways to protect a lot of my aggressive characters. It was a lot of fun. And then I ended up playing green purple into the Bucky meta that existed in early set 4, where like green purple was just extinct, right? Because any deck that was aggressive versus just a turn 2 Bucky just couldn't really be played. Like we would lose all of our cards. Their shift Robin Hoods were much stronger than anything that we could do, and like it was very frustrating. And that's how I ended up on Blue Steel for Dallas. But after Blue Steel's sort of falling out of the metagame, I started really studying Artabax and Earlmeister and a number of the people that were like a really big deal in bringing EA back to the table. And that is how we are where we are now.
Yeah, so what's the deck doing now? Because it does look a bit different than it did last set.
Yeah, Tomas, it is doing a lot of different things, and it is doing a lot of things. I think that like the way that you started talking about, and like I asked Justin this question earlier, like what is it that Steel Song is actually doing, right? Ideally, which is we're sort of curving, and we want to play like Naveen and do a whole new world. Alternatively, we're like playing Cinderella, and we're Storm Rage awning your 1-drop, and we're just like trading for value. This green purple is waiting for the opponent to tell us what they're doing. This is a reactive toolbox style of deck. So like let's take a look at, for example, like the 1-drop suite here really fast. I think it's the best way to kind of get into this. So we have a couple of Chernobog's followers. We have a couple of Rafikis. We have 4 Clarabelles, which are going to match with our 3 Clarabelle shift package. in sort of allowing us to have like an aggressive, let's dump our hand and then redraw a bunch of cards with Clarabelle. This is particularly useful against the Ruby Amethyst matchup, which is a very favorable matchup for us, depending on if we can get a Rourke or not. You're going to hear me qualify a lot of the things I say with if we get this card, if we get that card. And that's because this deck is so toolbox oriented, a true toolbox. So, like, Chernobog's fantastic for games where we just need to get a couple of lore and then crack it, and then get into a bonsai. Chris Merfolk, fantastic for the Ruby Sapphire matchup where I need 4 lore really quick. And if I can bounce it back into my hand with Snake, great, fantastic. If not, understandable if it gets Sisu'd, that's great. I got 4 lore. I'm not worried about it. The 2-drop slot, guys, as you'll notice, is also like the 3 most different 2-drops in the whole game, right? Like Snake, there to protect and aggressively questing 1-drop. The Hyena, like Bonsai, to quest aggressively and continue kind of like a la Curse Merfolk. And then Ursula, which we hard mulligan for against Steel Song, right? This is the only way that we can ensure victory here. And what's crazy, and like I'm sure Justin will tell you, is that this is all it takes, is one of these to just put the game plan just enough off kilter that like we can now play a fair game against them. That Naveen is maybe now not as strong as it could be.
Yeah, the 2-drop Ursula, like the fact that you can
Great
bounce
card.
it like, repeatedly and replay it, that is like the detriment. Like it's not even that actually, just having to have multiples in general. It's like
Certainly.
very game ending for Amber Steel.
Yeah, real
Give us
bad
an
for Amber
insurance
Steel.
policy. Yeah. Just a couple of more things, like in like every single card here, guys, like is going to have a specific strategy that it's designed for. And like if you listen to Earlmeister or Artivax or any of the guys that kind of pioneered green purple, this entire deck is not really saying we have the most powerful cards in the format, look at us. It is we have all of the solutions for all of the most powerful cards in the format. Given the right tools, we can beat anything. The Crab, fantastic for aggressive matchups. Justin, what's up, dude? You got something?
Clarabelle, the big one, the shift one.
Yeah.
How important or how much have you like played into this card? I feel like in my head how Clarabelle works in this deck is because like since you run the shift Ursa, the bigger one, you might as well run another 7-drop since you're gonna ink till 7 anyways. But how does Clarabelle in general like put like place in this? I feel like she doesn't belong here. I think.
Ooh, I have an answer for this.
Okay, so let's imagine. Okay, so give me a situation. Are you telling me that like put me in a situation on turn 1? Am I in the dark?
Sure. In the dark.
So I'm in the dark. I'm on the play. I have no idea who my opponent is playing. Sure. Do I have a 1-drop Clarabelle in my opening hand and a 7-drop Clarabelle?
Sure. Yeah. Let's give you that.
Cool. I'm 100% keeping both of those cards. The only situation in which I am not keeping both of them is if like the other 4 inkable cards in my hand are like 3 or 4 drops. So if I have a number of 2-drop inkable cards in my hand or 1-drop inkable cards in my hand, this becomes more and more keepable. But if I do have 1-drop Clarabelle and 7-drop Clarabelle and at least 1 bounce creature, there's a high chance I'm keeping all 3 of those cards. And I am going to play aggressively to my curve. Okay. I'm going to dump my hand because the situations in which that curve ends up working out, and I end up drawing 4 cards or drawing 5 cards, very high. Yeah, I mean, like, and if I get B-prepped on that, or if like generally speaking, I'm going to end up at 9 or 10 lore following that and get the refill. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Tomasz?
Interesting.
I was gonna say it. Kind of oversimplify things, but I think especially the 7-drop Clarabelle, it's ink until it's not. Like I think more often than not, like you're probably gonna end up inking it just
100%
because it's gonna be like the hardest thing in your hand to cast. But when you play it and you catch someone with it, oh, you're drawing so many cards. You guys remember that one card? whatever it is, like the 4-drop uninkable emerald card that everyone tries to make work, where you draw cards until
The
your hand
Mufasa
matches
card.
theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that, but it's good.
Interesting.
I don't think
Interesting.
right now you guys are fully understanding like what it is like to have a slight inefficiency in your hand for turns 2, 3, and 4 to draw 5 to 6 cards guaranteed on your 5th turn. Like this is like in the worst case scenario, right? Where like I'm unable to bounce this Clarabelle back to my hand, we're unable to get it back onto the board on turn 4 or something like that. Like the net on this is massive. Of course, like we would overall sort of prefer to have Ursula, like the big shift on the board, because it's a little bit more proactive and then it shuts down Steel Song, it prevents
Makes more
singing.
sense, yeah, for sure.
But like the net of Clarabelle is fantastic. But like I think to answer your guys' question, Ursula is the sort of game ender earlier. Clarabelle is the Ruby Amethyst answer to doesn't matter if you B-prep me. We're going.
Are you inking Clarabelle outside of like Ruby Amethyst, not Ruby Amethyst and Ruby Sapphire? Because I don't see this card
absolutely.
doing anything.
Of course, not a card that's actionable, especially against Ruby Sapphire in particular. We're looking for bonsais. And then just really quick, guys, just to get back into like what cards are worth it for what. So like we don't see a lot of Diablo in this format, but Elsa is massively important. Like if there is a Diablo on the board, you need to have an Elsa for that because the runaway card advantage can get you. So very important there. Lyle, I could spend hours talking about like the importance of Lyle.
That card.
Lyle will end the Ruby Amethyst matchup. Like the bounce package that they play and the bounce package that we play, Lyle's introduction and the forcing of their foxes to now trade unfavorably into your snakes and to your Rafikis is huge. So like massive fan of the Rourke, and we can bounce and we can replay Rourke.
What are your best matchups then? So like if there's like the question that Tomas said earlier or asked earlier, what are the 2 decks that you're like, okay, if I face you, I'm gonna have a high chance of 2-0ing you?
Ruby Amethyst is a buy. Yes, this is our best matchup.
Amethyst.
This is a rollover, dude. We have Chromacon. We have Chromacon and we have
Chromacon
Elsa.
is hard. It is pretty tough.
Like there's an argument to play 2 Chromacon just because of how powerful it is. Like if I have 1 Rourke against Ruby Amethyst, they lose 4 to 6 lore immediately. Like if you don't have the brawl, the second I play this card, like the game is going south.
Interesting.
And I think you only really understand how significant that is after you watch the matchup, because their entire game plan, right, is the bouncing attrition plan. We're going to draw cards. We're going to get like sort of like regressive value.
Trade 1+1.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. I'll say Ruby Amethyst is our best matchup, and then anything aggressive is also a very, very good matchup. Foxes, like Lyle, anything that sort of exists between mid-range and aggro, very positive.
So then on the other end, what are you scared of? What's there to keep an eye out for?
I'm terrified, Tomas, of you. I'm terrified of not seeing Curse Merfolk into Bonsai. Because that's my only way to fight you, man. Like,
so why not run 4?
Yeah.
Why not play 4 Curse Merfolk?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We don't have the space for the Uninkables, man.
Storm Rage
We have shift lines. Right?
Storm Rage on,
like,
yeah, true.
And also the more bad one drops I play, right, the more great targets Justin gets on Steel Song. Like if I'm playing Justin and I see him go Ink, Strength of a Raging Fire, and then into Cinderella, Little Cindy, I don't get to play a 1-drop, guys. Like I don't get to play one. I have to wait for Ursula on 2.
Most of the time I don't have it, trust me.
Right, but like there's this weird metagame situation where like I have to I can't play 12 1-drops because then I have too many for the situation where I get wrecked by Steel Song. And also I have 14 Uninkables in this deck, and more Uninkables would
that's
mean
cutting
that,
it close.
It's very close, dude.
Yeah, 14 definitely is. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I agree
13
with
would be
14
better.
though. I agree with 14.
All right.
It's not a bad number.
Anything else you want to hit on with this deck before we wrap this one up?
No, just you have to mulligan for what you need. So this deck wins games when you mulligan for what you need. So um, if you're playing against aggro, you need Rourke. If you're playing against Ruby Saf, you need Bonsai. If you're playing against a mirror match, you really need rabbits. So mulligan for what
I
you
have
need.
last question before we move on from this. The 5-drop Elsa, how good do you think the 5-drop Elsa in this deck? I feel like the 5-drop
Card's
Elsa
so good.
I feel like the 5-drop Elsa is really good in Blurple, only because
Mm.
Blurple doesn't have like a real way to deal with like characters that are not exerted. But how good is Elsa in this deck specifically?
It's about sort of like the fail state versus the fail rate. So like if we don't have an answer for Diablo, like imagine that there's a turn 2 shift Diablo here. I'm okay with my opponent drawing 3 cards before I can out it with an Elsa. That's how powerful this deck is on the board. But we need Elsa. And Elsa is stronger than Sir Hiss. So, and Elsa also deals with things like a Tamatoa that would otherwise end the game, or an Elsa that would otherwise end the game. So it provides us with like a situational out to a card that would otherwise win the game. And we're not super happy to be like trading a number of our cards into a card via Elsa, but she is a necessary, I think, finishing condition for a lot of things that we just don't have an answer for.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, all that said, thank you very much, Miles. I think we're gonna move into our last deck of kind of the big four, and then after that, we'll probably have to wrap it up there because we have been enjoying talking so much. Let me pull up a deck list real quick, and I gotta say, Johnny, since you drew straws last, we're gonna give you Ruby Amethyst to talk about. What's your take on this deck? What's it doing?
Man, like I said, I think Ruby Amethyst just kind of after set 2. I mean, people played it set 1, right? Because it was really Amber Steel or it was Ruby Amethyst. You were playing one of the two. Then transition into a set where literally if you wanted to compete, you had to play it. And so that just naturally gave people a comfortability with Ruby Amethyst, which then and I kind of, I don't know how you guys feel, but it is.
That's a good point.
It kind of feels like set by set. It's like 1 or 2 additions to each deck. That's all you kind of need. As we've been going along, and this deck, I think in particular, most specifically, even though it does look a little different from set 2, it's kind of it has the same game plan. Like aside from some of the other decks and different angles that you would take in the past, aside from set 1, completely different game plan for this deck as it is today from when it was set 1. But it's very just like it does everything. It has like if you need to play it aggro, you can play a little more aggro. If you need to play it mid-rangey, it has the mid-range. If you need to play it kind of more control-y, you can if you're playing like if you're playing against aggro, right? So however you kind of need to mold this deck to be in any given matchup, you can play it that way. That's why this deck, people call it the most consistent and doesn't have any real bad matchups, just because it is so interchangeable depending on how you're playing it, as opposed to if you're playing hyper aggro, you're hyper aggro. You're never playing control. If you're playing Steel Song, I mean, there's different iterations of Steel Song, but based on how you built your deck is based on how you're going to play that deck. And then like Ruby Sapphire, like you're always playing control. You're never playing aggro. So for this deck in particular, it doesn't, in my opinion, have any real bad matchups except for possibly one, which is this Amber Emerald, which is kind of, I think, when you mentioned it, who was it that mentioned Amber Emerald? I forgot. It's like a dark horse. Somebody mentioned that.
I brought
Miles.
it up originally.
Okay, so I do think actually that could be a dark horse that just comes out of nowhere. I mean, recently I've watched it play against Ruby Sapphire, and that was its worst matchup, and it actually has a pretty good matchup against it now. So I do think that's very good. The only thing is like the under the sea tech of Amber Emerald doesn't really work in this matchup in particular. But aside from that, like the discard has always been like the bane of the existence. Like when it was Bucky, this deck never wanted to see Bucky. Not to say that it could never beat it. Again, it's the most consistent, so there are ways, and depending on how good of a pilot you are, will determine how bad of a matchup playing like discard is. You've gotten a little stronger against discard because of the library. Now, if you're playing that correctly, like with the Magic Broom you see here, the huge tech with Magic Broom in the library is unlike the Queen's Castle, where you don't get that immediate draw. It's really specifically based on if it can stay on the field for the next turn. You could play the library on turn 5, let's say. You play the library, you play Magic Broom, then you play Chernobog, or you play another Magic Broom, whatever. Banish the Magic Broom to draw a card, plus you draw an additional card because of it being in the library. So you have that extra addition of like having that guarantee draw, which helps in the discard.
Just efficiency.
Yeah, right, exactly. So you have, it's a little bit more of a guarantee. I guess you could say that replaces the Maleficent in a way. But yeah, the one Sisu is the one thing I would say in this particular iteration that I feel like I don't always see. If they are playing Sisu, it is a one of normally from what I know, but you don't see it all the time. But you guys can expand. I don't play this deck anymore. We have other people in our group that would probably have more of insight from actually playing it. But just from kind of, I think it's a little easier to talk about even as someone who doesn't play it, just because of the fact of it's kind of been in the same lane since set 2. It's kind of the same situation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
So, kind of touching on that, at least in your opinion, like we're looking at this deck. This has 2 cards from the new set. To you, is that a strength or a weakness? Because I mean, the deck's still putting up results, and it's not really playing that many new cards.
So I see the library. What's the other one from this?
Oh, just the 2 copies of the library.
Oh, you're just saying in particular. Okay, okay. What do I think that says about? I mean, I just think it, again, with the consistency, like I think it's gonna be very similar set by set until bounce specifically is no longer a tech, and then eventually someone will find a Ruby Amethyst deck that works that doesn't need bounce, because you have basically everything. You have draw and you have destruction. It's just like a match made in heaven, essentially. These two met on Match.com, and it was just a perfect. They just sparked right off the beginning. So it's just kind of that deck that's going to be there, the color combination, in my opinion. And I think only having to add one in some sets, maybe it's 2 cards, just kind of set by set, just goes to show how strong and stable like this type of deck is, and why a lot of people are keeping it, because of, again, the comfortability from just having to play it from set 2 to the consistency of the deck, which I think makes it hard.
Like, it drags you down to its level, right? It's like, come down here into like my Queen's Castle, into my library, like come kill my Flynn, come kill my castle, come deal with my Sisu. Okay? Commit to the board, right? Like it's like a classic, almost like commit to my problem, and I'm going to wrath over the top of you, and then I am going to quest on top of you, and then crack all of my cards, draw more of them, and overcommit to the board again, lay my traps again, come back into my castle. Like the game plan is so reliable, if that makes sense. Yeah,
and I think this deck's biggest weakness is like find the goat. Every time I play it, it's like literally that's the weakness of the deck.
Every time that someone
like,
lost, it's because like they're always like, apparently I only run like 2 goats. So like,
it's always searching through the deck.
End of the game.
It's always just the last goat.
The goats make 3 of the goats make their way to the bottom 10. It's just how it
kind of
is.
like on top of all that stuff. I've seen some sentiment. I feel like I agree with this for the most part, but I'd like to get your guys' take on it real quick. I feel like this is one of the decks where, if we're just looking at like kind of skill floor, skill ceiling, I think this is probably one of the easiest decks to pick up at a base level, and probably one of the hardest decks to get to like 90 plus
to the no I'm not level.
Sure.
Yeah.
And with that said, my kind of feeling with the deck is like, for people who are deciding if this is the deck they should bring, I feel like it's almost on 2 extremes, where it's like, if you have no idea what to play, like it's maybe the deck you bring, but
Mhm.
it's also like if you're the kind of person that's going to show up with this deck, like you already know that.
Sure. I
Does that
don't
kind of
know.
track?
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that point, only because based off of experience of playing people who are more experienced with it and people that aren't, and this can translate to any deck that you're playing, right? People make missteps. The
True.
better player you are, the less missteps you make. But in this deck particularly, playing someone who's mastered it or at least closer, like better at it than someone who's not as much, they can't really tell the difference of when they should be questing, when they should be drawing cards, when they should be worrying about board control. Like I was saying, how this deck can kind of do it all, and that's why it's consistent. It's hard for people to figure out at which point should I be doing
Mhm.
the thing. Should I be drawing? Should I just quest out, not worry about it? Do I not need to worry about it? Do I need to like get control of the board in some way, shape, or form? I feel like this deck in particular is where I see the most missteps, and it might be because it's the most played. People are most comfortable with it, so that's why you get more of a sample size from this deck in particular. Um, but that's the only thing I would say based on that is just, yeah, I think you can pick it up and play, and you can generally, what you're doing with the deck as far as like, I need a bounce rabbit to get a draw. But as far as this is the time to do that versus I need to just slam down Merlin goat, like when are people actually doing the right thing at the right time?
That too. You're right. You're right. When are people doing the right thing at the right time? I feel like every time I played someone that's playing this deck, I can tell. I'm not sure if this is just me because I've played against this deck like quite a lot of times because DQ, a
Mm-hmm.
member of our team, has been playing this deck like really well, and I think he's
Really
one of
well,
the
yeah.
he's one of the better red ruby amethyst pilots that I know personally. Um, and I feel like the distinction between him and the other players that I know is the difference between when do you play your castle and when do you quest with your one drops. I think are the two things that
Mhm.
every time I see someone quest with a Chernobog and like just like either like draw or not draw, I feel like every time like that was the case, I feel like every time they like drew just because like it's turn one, it's a card that draws a card, so I'll draw a card, play a character, pass. Every time they just do that because that's what the card says. I feel like that's the difference between like good player and an okay player
Right.
because
Yeah.
Chernobog doesn't always have to draw. Like I know I'm the Amber Seal player, but I'm like just in general, like obviously if you're against Amber Seal player, you're gonna draw. But a lot of the times like people just activate the effects just to activate the effects, but that separates you from like a really good player by just keeping it as a like against just for example actually against Ruby Sapphire as a if you have a turn box follower, chances are you're probably not gonna draw with this card until like turn whatever when they're about to actually like be preppy or CC you. It's the time you probably want to draw with turn box like 5 out of 10 times. So that
Mm-hmm.
those are the things that separates I think Ruby Amethyst player and when to play your location, right? Because sometimes
Oh
people
yeah.
just play your location on 4 because it's turn 4 versus like I have cards on my board that are threats, so I'm gonna make you choose between X card and X card. So I feel like those are also like the difference makers, and specifically this deck actually.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and,
would definitely
and
say like
okay.
I haven't played this deck as much recently, but I do. I think before you guys kind of knew me as much, like I have some good experience with the deck, and that's definitely the one thing is like if you're picking up this deck, the one thing to take to heart that'll kind of level you up the fastest is just be really mindful, like have a reason to play the locations when you play them. Because
Mm-hmm.
playing like especially castle, playing it at the wrong time is the easiest way to just eat all your tempo and throw it in the garbage and like
100%.
180 the game on yourself.
Yeah, and just as a final note to me, anyone that's going into it with this deck that wants to master it or is getting into it relatively like more, you've just been playing it more recently, is find I don't there's a million videos on this deck by now, I'm sure, and in
For
the
sure.
same point, the same way to win from like set 3 to now, it's kind of like, or the same way to play it, it's really the same way to go
It's a
about this deck.
dance.
Exactly,
Dance.
it's the same dance from like set 3, I would say. There's videos to
Yeah.
watch for sure, like sometimes you don't need the extra card draw. And the amount of times I've won because someone sang with Merlin Rabbit, like friends on the other side, and then bounced it back instead of just questing with it to get it one step closer to Merlin Endgame. Like the amount of times I've won because of plays like that, like there's so many just game switches where I'm like, oh, thank God, I'm so glad you did that instead of questing out.
True.
On Johnny's point, dude, like nothing will teach you that like playing, right? Like those very, very minor situations where like the sing versus the quest is like the game breaking piece. It's very true, especially playing with amethyst cards.
Also, in this deck specifically, just my final note on this deck is like, the only thing that changes that I've seen since set 1, or actually set 2, to set 5 is like I feel like it's either you play a different 1-drops in this deck. Like that's probably the only like big change that people would do a lot of times, because like and amount of Merlin crabs that you play is probably the difference between like I think meta cost is what it is, because like but like all the Merlins, all the mims, the castles, the removals, I feel like they're definitely like solidified the deck. Flynn Rider even is like it's like not a flex card, but like you can definitely take it out in certain times. I don't think that card needs to be like removed in this deck. Honestly, it's like that card complements Castle, weirdly enough, because like, they're two big threats for some reason. Like you have to choose one or the other, or like they're gonna get away with the game like really easily. Like you think it's just 3 lore or 2 lore, but that is huge for this deck, because I also think that purple or amethyst, which is like initially in this game is the draw power, and then ruby being like the removal, those two pairs like really OP for me. I think those are a really good combination of ink colors. Yep.
Yeah, kind of hard to go wrong as long as you're in the ballpark.
Agreed.
I think we had a couple other decks that we were maybe going to touch on. We've all enjoyed yapping quite a bit, so we've run pretty.
We're
long,
over.
But
we're over.
Yeah,
Hell
I think.
yeah.
I think we'll wrap it up there. We hit the big 4. Just for like some final notes, I wouldn't be surprised to run into like some Emerald Steel, some Amber Emerald, Blurple, that kind of stuff like we were talking about. These are the 4 kind of main decks, but that definitely doesn't mean it's the only thing you're gonna face. It doesn't mean these are the only things you have to play. These are just the ones we expect to see the most and the ones we expect to do the best. I think we've touched on it, a few different times through here. I think we're all kind of coming around to the idea that like if something is gonna surprise us and do better than we expect, it might very well be the Amber Emerald deck. I think there's still a lot of room to explore that, but we don't really have the time to get into it now. So
Abe is glad we didn't go over it. It doesn't need more light for him.
Yeah, we gotta get Abe in here at some point.
Talk about it. True.
So if anybody has any final closing remarks on the meta and what we're expecting, feel free here. But otherwise, I think we'll get ready to wrap it up if that's good with you guys.
Wish us luck. We're so happy to have you guys. Thank you guys so much for listening. Tomas, you did a fantastic job hosting us in Teddy's absence. Justine, Johnny, pleasure to have you guys on. This is our second episode, and we were talking about having new members of BSG on every week, and look at that. Justin and Johnny here. Ba-ba-boo.
Yes, sir.
And keep an eye, because I think maybe this Monday, I got to talk to you, Justine. We might be recording. We'll see. We're going to find a day, but we have a very cool idea for a different type of video that no one else is doing.
Agreed.
That's going to be super fun, super different than anything you guys watch.
True.
I think that a lot of people enjoy it. So keep an eye out on the channel, subscribe, hit the notification button, so when those videos do come out, you're always ready and you see that.
Show some love, guys.
All right, I think
Thank you guys.
we're good to do the outro here. We'll go through it real quick. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Of course, shout out again to Supernova, our gracious sponsor. We love them so much. Make sure you check them out. Supernova. God, oh no, where did I put the link? Check them out at supernovatc.com. Check out. They got a lot of cool stuff, not just Lorcana. Honestly, mostly not Lorcana. They got really cool things over there. Make sure you take a look. Let's go down the list. Miles, you got anything to say? Anything to plug? Where can people find you?
At Miles_Piles, guys, on X.com, formerly known as Twitter. And please feel free to just email us if you'd like to at backseatgenius@gmail.com for any inquiries that you have. If you have any questions about where we're going to be at Vegas, please feel free to let me know, let Teddy know. Happy to have you guys along for the journey.
All right. Thank you, Miles, for being on today. Let's go down the list one more. Justine, what do you got to say? Where can people find you? What do you want to shout out?
So Amber Seal Best Deck. I'm kidding. No, it's not. But I think most of my handle is gonna be like the GBF, and then my SoundCloud as well, from 4 years ago. Check it out. It's actually pretty fun. Yeah, that's all I got.
All right. Perfect. Thank you for being on today. And Johnny, you were talking about it a little bit. Do you wanna tease any more of that video, or you wanna leave the people waiting?
It should be some nice hot takes, something that's, you know, out of the realm of like podcasting. Not that it's not great, but I think Lorcana content needs to spice up a little bit. So we
A lot of it.
yeah, so we have an idea for that. It's gonna be kind of like a little fight debate show type of situation. So look out for that. My Twitter is just
on
yep.
the Backseat Genius YouTube. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
it's gonna be on this same YouTube channel. So you don't gotta go anywhere else for it. Just subscribe here. And then yeah, my Twitter is at JohnnyTCG on X, Twitter, whatever. Aside from that, yeah, there's nothing else to plug. Good luck to everyone out in Vegas. Hope you guys do well.
All right, perfect. And thank you as well for hopping on. I myself, if you don't already know, I'm Tomasz. You can find me at StoneDragon_ on Twitter for the memes, for the takes. You know, feel free. Send me deck list pictures of blue red so I can yell at you. All that good stuff. If you want to find the podcast, you know, wherever you're watching or listening to it right now, it's always going to be there. YouTube and Spotify are going to be the main two, but Teddy might have it percolating out elsewhere. You can find the team at Backseat Genius on Twitter, and as mentioned, there's also the email if you want to reach out to us. You know, we're always happy to talk. We're gonna banter, but you know, it's always
Sorry
a great
for the
time.
runtime, Ted. He's gonna see this and be like, "What?"
You're like, no shot, right?
So thank you again for everybody coming in, hanging out. Appreciate y'all. Hopefully, we'll see a bunch of you at Vegas. And I mean, I'm sure we're gonna have a lot to talk about after.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys. Peace
All
out.
right. Peace.